Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Non Sequitur Nerds. Tonight, we're going to need you to gather the 10 rings and watch out for dragons because we are talking Shang-Chi tonight. Of course, it's going to be a spoiler episode, but that aside, as always, I am Tim, joined by Ian and his brother Keenan. How you doing tonight, guys?
Hey, buddy, we're doing pretty good. We are just overcoming some technical difficulties because Tim can't figure out how to push the right buttons.
I pushed a
Uh,
button, all right? I pushed the button. The button didn't button.
anyway, so yes, we actually just finished watching Marvel's Eternals. By
All
the way,
right.
again, don't listen to online reviews. I went into it not really caring, and I came out of it feeling pretty fulfilled. So
It's worth it. It's
yeah,
different. It's kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy in a way, where you like don't know anything about them, and then you're like, huh, it's not too bad. Not
All right.
quite as good as Guardians of the Galaxy, but still worth seeing.
Guardians
yeah,
was pretty good.
Yeah, Guardians was really good.
Okay.
Don't expect it to be Guardians of the Galaxy, but expect that it's better than what you anticipated for characters that you had no idea who they are.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
So, Shang-Chi, Marvel's kind of sleeper movie that came out of really nowhere. I mean, it's a character that nobody really knows
Yeah,
about.
like Shang-Chi, like it was a character. He was a character that I knew existed, but beyond that, like really no knowledge of Shang-Chi at all myself.
He seemed like a character similar to Iron Fist, who to
Yeah.
me is much more famous than Shang-Chi. So
Yeah,
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 but
yeah,
they
definitely.
gave the
Iron
movie
Fist, I knew a
treatment.
lot more about him.
yeah,
Yeah, but they gave the movie treatment much better treatment than the
yeah.
TV show because Iron Fist was terrible,
Yeah,
terrible,
which is a shame because a lot,
terrible.
lot of those other like Marvel shows were pretty solid, but yeah, Iron Fist was kind of the weak point, which is what kind of had me worried about Shang-Chi at first because it was a, at least on paper, a pretty similar character, but I was thoroughly impressed with it. I absolutely enjoyed it. Easily one of my top five Marvel films.
I would say that the the crowning achievement of Shang-Chi to me is that it is a movie that transcends the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
don't have to be that movie could have no association to Marvel whatsoever, and it would work perfectly as a movie.
Oh, absolutely.
It needs
Absolutely.
it needs a couple of minor story tweaks, but it doesn't need anything different. Like
Wait,
there's
well,
nothing that really forces it to be in the MCU.
Well, I mean, and then even then, yeah, like you said, it'd be minor stuff because apart from like they mention Iron Man by name, I think once. Well, once and then vaguely referenced in a second scene. And then there was a character who we'll get into in a little bit, was reprising their role in this film. But apart from that, like those, two minor things in that character, they could have taken them out, not been a Marvel film, and it still would have been great.
Yeah, and then like Keenan said, the references to the blip. But
Yeah. Yep.
before we continue on, I do want to say, extend a thank you to Tim for finally watching the movie,
Okay, it,
because
it finally came out on Disney Plus. All right. So
I've only been taunting him and poking fun at him. And rightfully so. It's what he did to me for Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
yeah,
Um, uh, so
I deserved it.
one good turn deserves the other. Anyway, so with that, yeah, Shang-Chi, um, really like all elements of the movie, I think were done really well. Casting, cinematography, directing, the special effects, like
Dude, can I
they
gush
weren't
about the
even
choreography of that movie?
oh
Oh
yeah,
my god.
Some
The
of the better fight scenes in a modern movie because it's not annoying shaky cam and lots of cutting.
Yep.
Like you could tell it was the actors actually doing their own stunts and it
Yes.
like long protracted shots where you could clearly see them. That's what makes fight scenes cool and enjoyable.
Yes.
It had great choreography, especially fight choreography.
I mean,
yeah.
like some of, if not the best fight scene choreography, not just in a Marvel film, but in any movie that I've seen in a long
Like
time.
like the only movie that I could think of immediately would be like the John Wick movies, which was directed by a literal fight choreographer, which
Yeah.
is why their fight scenes are so good.
Yep.
So
But I mean, yeah, like that was one thing. Like when I was watching it, I kept actually saying, "Oh man, this fight scene is so cool! Oh my god, this choreography!" Like that was the biggest thing that drew me into it, was seeing that and just seeing how everything just, their movements are so fluid. Like you can tell that they did a lot of training, specifically for these fight scenes, and it paid off. Like the movie is a spectacle.
And it had a lot of nice homages to like other like it had some like Bruce Lee vibes to it, and you got some Jackie Chan vibes with like using like objects and stuff in kind of
Right?
a funny way. And then it even had like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon type choreography, like with
Yeah.
toward the beginning with like the Mandarin and the mom character. So I liked those other references to like famous for Western audience members,
Right.
like reference to Eastern type of martial art type
Oh,
stuff.
absolutely. Well, the fight scene pretty early on in the film, where they're on the side of that building that still looks to be under construction. There's all like the
Mhm.
bamboo scaffolding. That was incredibly well done. Like Ian knows this. I am not a fan of heights at all.
None of us are.
No,
We're all afraid of heights.
we're all, yeah, that was a pardon my French, a pants shitting moment
Yes.
in that movie, but it
Like,
was
nope,
still
nope, nope,
yeah, it's just like, this is really cool, but nope.
nope.
I'm
Exactly.
getting vertigo just thinking about it. Anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Well, and
yeah,
I like I said, I watched it on Disney Plus. I watched the IMAX like enhanced ratio thing that they put out. And like that, like, I mean, obviously, when you're watching it on the IMAX, that's a completely different experience. But at least watching that IMAX ratio, you still get a good sense of what you're getting. That did a lot for that scene and the movie in general, actually. But yeah, that scene, like, nope, nope. Every time they would pan down and you would see somebody fall, I'm like, nope, nope. I'm gonna have nightmares tonight about falling.
yeah, you feel your butthole pucker
Yep,
every time that happens.
yep. Just a little. It's finally starting to ease up.
Yeah, yeah. So if we take a look at the movie and like kind of break things down, kind of some of the things we talked about. So casting.
Yes.
The cast selection on this. Simu Liu obviously plays the main character of Sean Shang-Chi. Uh,
Sean. Which
Sean,
that was
Yeah,
a great scene when they
Sean,
explained
yeah.
that.
you went from Shang-Chi to Sean. Um,
But
so
Shang. Yeah.
he's a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
Nobody knew him from anything. A
What
Canadian. I think he's from Toronto,
Well, didn't
I
he
believe.
get his start as a stock photography model,
I think so.
or
Oh, that's hilarious. I didn't
or
know
he's
that.
done some stock photography at
Yeah.
he put up a picture of one of the things he did on his Twitter, and it was like, "This is me, random Asian businessman."
So he's like a Getty Images guy. That's
Kinda,
hilarious.
yeah. Like I don't know if he got his start, but that's like one of the things he did.
Yeah, as a virtual unknown, I thought he was great. He was
Oh,
charismatic.
absolutely, yeah.
He was funny, and he did the drama well. Obviously, did the work needed to do the fight choreography. I
Oh
thought he
yeah,
was great. He was very
absolutely.
entertaining.
Yeah, no, I think he's got a bright future. This was a fantastic movie to really kind of showcase him. Admittedly, there's not a lot of, like drama per se, but he acted the dramatic parts very well.
Yes,
He
absolutely. He's
he
got
emotes
range.
very well. He there's feeling to what he's doing.
Absolutely.
He's not just, generic martial artist 14 type
Right.
person. You
He's not a
know,
Mortal Kombat extra.
yeah, exactly. So I felt like he was a very smart cast choice, and like you said, very charismatic. Very, he's funny, he's dramatic, he's athletic.
Yeah,
He fit the part very well. So,
absolutely.
bravo. And then we look at his counterpart in the character of Katie, also played by Aquafina,
So
which is
I thought Aquafina was a rapper. Like I didn't know who the person Aquafina was. I just heard the name and thought it was a rapper. She's a comedian?
I think she's done rap as like a side hustle, but like nothing major. But yeah, she's primarily a comedian. And I've never really seen her in many other things other
Yeah.
than when she did the voice in Raya. She's like the dragon in the
Oh,
Raya movie.
that's where I recognize her voice from.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Which is
my god, I love
pretty
her.
much the dragon thing in
Yeah.
Disney as well.
so I recognize her voice elsewhere. And I told Keenan this when we saw the movie. her voice reminds me of our aunt.
Yeah, she sounds exactly like her.
Yes, she sounds exactly like Keenan and I's aunt Mimi.
Okay.
You may or may not have met. I don't
I think I've
remember.
met years ago.
Probably.
Not
She
enough to
lives
remember
out
her
in
voice.
she lives out in Valpo.
Well, she sounds like Aquafina, like
yeah.
almost exactly.
That's amazing.
Her and they kind of look alike too. I mean, granted, Hispanic, Hispanics and Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans, they can have very similar skin tones, facial structures, that kind of stuff. So,
but they both have that like really raspy kind of husky sort
Yeah.
of voice that almost has like a. I mean, even though our aunt obviously doesn't come from like New York or whatever, she almost has like an inflection that kind of sounds almost like that sort of Bronxy kind of vibe that like Aquafina kind of has. Yeah,
Gotcha.
it was very odd, but yeah, she's a doppelganger voice wise anyway for one of our relatives.
There you go. But no, like
yeah.
I thought like her portrayal of Katie. I hope we get to if Shang-Chi hopefully gets a sequel. I hope that Aquafina reprises her role because like those two played off of each other so well. I mean, like I don't want to get super stereotypical here with the theme of this movie, but it was very yin and yang. They knew how to work those characters with each other, and it was a really enjoyable part of the film. Absolutely.
Some of that stems from very smart writing. It was very intelligently written, and then very intelligently cast, as we said. We have characters that play well together, and we have actors that play well together. And you can obviously have a very intelligently written script and just shite actors,
Yeah.
and it will just ruin it.
Yep. I mean,
think of
or
a
vice
member
versa. You can have like award-winning actors and a bad script. That's not going to salvage it.
Street Fighter. Um,
Yep.
yeah, so they played very well together. And then obviously, we can't talk about the movie without the main antagonist.
Wenwu, the Mandarin.
Wenwu, the Mandarin, played by the legendary Tony Leung, who is a very famous Hong Kong, martial arts film actor.
Yep.
A legend in the
Yeah.
industry.
Oh yeah.
And I've read a few interviews with him. He was very passionate about the character because he felt very connected to the character, felt like, it wasn't necessarily an evil character, but a character that he could kind of sympathize with and
Right.
really kind of feel. And obviously the three of us have seen the movie,
Yep.
I feel that way about the character himself. If we
Yeah.
talk about the character of Wenwu or the Mandarin himself, I don't consider him a villain
Right.
so much as an antagonist, or it's hard for me to describe like what he is.
Right. I mean, while he definitely like when they delve into his past, like he definitely has a villainous past. I mean, he was a warlord. Yeah, he was a warlord conqueror. He was a multinational gang boss. I mean, he's done some pretty what if you check down that list, like okay, bad guy, bad guy, bad guy, bad guy. But as the movie sets up pretty early on, once he meets what would become his wife, Shang-Chi's mother, he has a complete about face. He gives all that up. He disbands his organization and has a complete change in his life. And then it isn't until she, again, this is a spoiler episode. We warned you at the top. It isn't until she passes away that he starts going back into that. But it's less because he wants to do that again, and more because he's lost a part of himself. And from stuff that happens later in the film, he starts kind of going through that life again. But
yeah, so like Marvel movies, or the MCU in general, minus a few characters like Loki and Thanos and like Killmonger, have had the villain curse of where they've not had good villains. Like they're not interesting, they're not dynamic, they're kind of either just they're weak, or they're not interesting, or they're kind of too like Snidely Whiplash or whatever.
Well,
And Ian was kind of getting at this too. Like Wenwu slash Mandarin isn't a villain in the same kind of way as like, I don't know, like I mean, I guess Thanos to me is still qualifies as a villain. Like you could kind of understand his logic, but
right.
he's still pretty villainous in my
Right.
but Wenwu has such really empathetic places that he's coming from. And
Yeah.
like you said, he's done villainous things, but he makes a complete about face, and his current activities within the current timeline of the movie are for generally what I would say would be for good purposes.
Right.
Right.
He's trying to do the right thing. He's just not necessarily going about it the right way.
He's clearly just an antagonist in that he's opposing the protagonist.
Right.
But I
Yep.
still think, I mean, I would still call him a villain, I guess, just because that is, I guess, just what he's supposed to
That's
be.
his
But
role. Yeah.
he's so sympathetic in a vein like Killmonger, but like Killmonger also still had like parts about him that were hard to like sympathize with. Honestly,
Right.
you kind of felt for Wenwu. Like there weren't really many times where I was like, man, I can't relate to this dude.
Right.
Like I really fell for him for most of the
And that's why I don't think I can qualify him as a villain. I would the best I can qualify him as is the main antagonist.
Yeah. I agree on that one.
Can't I can't I don't have the capacity based upon the way they wrote his character to call him a true villain.
Right.
He's the antagonist of the movie, and it yeah, the movie probably has a villain in
giant
the
space alien.
yeah
Or whatever.
the giant like demon alien
The
thing, but
kaiju at the end.
yeah, the kaiju. But I don't know that I don't know that the movie in and of itself has an actual villain.
Right.
Maybe the kabuki mask wearing pain in the butt ninja,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I'd still consider that more. I mean, yeah, it's got a lot of antagonists, but not really a central villain,
yeah,
which is different from a lot of other Marvel films.
yeah, I would agree. And this is again where that smart writing comes into play. You know, you get that intelligent writing and the way the characters play well together. And again, Tony Long plays Mandarin fantastically
Oh yes,
and
yes.
is a completely wonderful character. It's a antagonist that I think has been long overdue in some of these movies that you actually give a crap about.
Right. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's some of the other MCU villains, like yeah, you can kind of understand where Ultron is coming from, but he's also a real douche nozzle about it.
Yeah.
Thanos, like Keenan said, you can understand his motivations, but I mean, then you look at Red Skull.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a Nazi.
Exactly.
Yeah,
He's a Nazi. I mean,
right.
that's all you need. I mean,
Yeah.
right. I mean, you look at Red Skull, you look at Loki, who goes from antagonist to
And
protagonist.
even when he was a villain, he was arguably, you could still kind of see he's suffering from I just want daddy's attention kind
yeah.
of.
I mean,
Yeah,
that was ultimately his entire motivation.
yeah. I mean, and then look at Black Widow. So Dreykov. Um,
That
I would consider he is a villain.
He's just like so irredeemably like gross
yeah.
that like there's no way you could like sympathize with him. He's just bad and you just want him to die, but just because he's like the epitome of human scum.
Yeah, he really
Right.
was. He really
Right.
was.
And then you have a character like Crossbones, who was admittedly not in the MCU for very long.
Which is a
Um,
shame.
yeah, it was a shame. It was a very underrated,
Underutilized.
underutilized character.
He's a secondary antagonist, like the head henchman, basically.
Right.
Kind of like
You
Oz in
are
old
henchman number one.
yes.
But it's okay. We still have
Um,
Batroc the Leaper.
Yeah.
Which, like,
True.
is a character I never thought I'd go, yeah, Batroc's in this one again.
Right.
Yep.
But
yeah,
but yeah,
Wenwu was
so
great.
back to Shang-Chi, though.
Yes. Anyway, so then, obviously, if we're going through the cast list, we cannot forget um, the highlight of the movie in Trevor Slattery.
Yep.
So, for those of you that have been fans of the MCU and have stuck through the MCU through thick and through thin, Iron Man 3, which was very thick in it so much that it was hard to get through, and very thin in its plot elements. It was not. It was definitely not the highlight of the Iron Man
Like,
component.
when they first announced that the Mandarin was going to be the main villain for Iron Man 3, people lost their minds because that was such a iconic part of Iron Man's rogue gallery. And then people were even more ecstatic when they're like, oh, they're updating the character. They're not making him a Chinese racist stereotype anymore. They're making him something new. They're reinventing the character. This is even better. We go through the movie. We're like, man, this is an awesome portrayal of the Mandarin. I love what they're doing with this. What do you mean he's just an actor who was hired by the bad guy and he's not actually the Mandarin?
He's Trevor Slattery. He's he was performing.
Yeah. Oh, so, like
Just
so
British.
many people were pissed
Yeah.
off about that. Oh my god.
I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
And then the whole revelation of crap. The hell.
Aldrich Killian being
Aldrich
the
Killian.
Mandarin.
I am the Mandarin. No, you're not.
No.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Shut up. Go back to letting Pepper beat the crap out of you.
You're right.
Um,
Well, I mean, they did kind of set the groundwork up for the eventual character of the Mandarin with that one shot that they did, "All Hail the King" or "Hail the King." Yeah, thank you. Where you see somebody interviewing Trevor in prison about this whole ordeal, and you come to find out the person that's interviewing him was a Ten Rings member, who the real Mandarin sent to get him, and they break him out of prison, and that's the last you see of Trevor. Which, as an aside, I wish Marvel would do their one shots again. Those were, I mean, they were like 15, 20 minutes tops, but they were good for like, filling in the gaps here or there, or kind of giving you a next time on Marvel thing. I wish they would do those again. But
Yeah.
you come to find out in Shang-Chi that, Trevor is still there at the Mandarin's fortress. He brought him there to kill him, but because his acting was so good, they have him doing shows of Hamlet, I believe it was, daily.
Yeah,
As a one-man show.
And I'm going to take. You said something that reminded me, and I'm going to take this as a moment for an aside. If everyone remembers in the original MCU movie Iron Man, the terrorist organization that kidnaps Tony is the Ten Rings.
Yep.
They reference this in the Mandarin,
Yep.
or I'm sorry, in Shang-Chi.
Yep.
The Mandarin Wenwu says, "Yes, many people have been part of my organization or claimed to be me over, in the past, So these Ten Rings members were, an offshoot or a splinter cell, or maybe looking for him at the time.
Right.
But point
Well, I mean,
being
because I think that would, based on what we see in Shang-Chi, I think that would have been the point in time where the Mandarin had started everything back up again after his wife had passed.
possibly.
I think so.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
Probably
potential
early
that's
on.
yeah. So it still potentially would fall in that could have been actually one of his cells that he actually did control, not pretenders like we see in Iron Man 3.
Also, just
In
to
theory.
go back to Iron Man 3, I think the thing it's not to the same level because it's not as iconic, but I likened it back when I saw it to being like, this would be if they teased up the Joker appearing in a Batman trilogy and not appearing until the third movie, and you're finally like, yes, we're seeing Batman face off against his iconic arch villain. We're finally going to see these two opposing forces, come head to head. And then when you see it, the Joker is actually some like dumbass.
Oh,
that
Jared
is just
Leto.
Joker.
I was just going to say
it's Jared Leto.
It's Jared Leto.
You see Jared Leto, and it's not even just it's just Jared Leto, not even his Joker.
Right, it's not even the Joker. It's just Jared Leto playing himself. Which I mean, like, okay, to his credit, like he was following the direction, he was following the script. I mean, I can't fault him. I've seen him in other stuff where he's fantastic. I'm looking forward to Morbius. I'll say it, but that was a bad Joker.
I mean, that makes one of us because one, I don't really find Morbius all that interesting of a character in the first place.
All right.
And two, like Jared Leto has turned me off so many times, and his portrayals of characters or the way his acting, or even just like reading interviews about like people having to work with him and how much of a douche nozzle he is.
I have heard that about him, like behind the scenes.
He's one of those method actors that really leans into the method acting. So I think during Joker,
he sent people like dead pigs, I think, and like used condoms or something.
Yeah,
little weird, really bizarre things. Yeah.
Yeah, and like it's
But rewinding from that, it was just like, to me, that's what I felt like in Iron Man 3
Yeah.
when I saw Trevor being this, like what you said, like it seemed like a cool updated version of like going from this racist Asian stereotype to, I guess you could argue he's kind of a stereotype of like American fears of Western, like Middle Eastern terrorism, but
Right.
it still kind of worked because he wasn't anything specific. He was just kind of
Right.
like vaguely of that kind of
Right. Yeah.
era.
He kind of took
But
shades from a bunch of different stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and then and like he didn't even sound Middle Eastern. He sounded like an American anyway. So
Right.
I guess it kind of worked. But then you just find out it's all a charade. So like
Yeah.
it disappointed me. But then going to Shang-Chi, like Ian's introduced him as a highlight, even though we were just talking about how much we hated on him. And that's
Right.
because he is kind of funny. Like
Yeah.
Ben Kingsley is a top-notch actor,
Oh,
an Oscar-winning
absolutely.
actor, and it's hilarious. And like in the context of like not wanting him to be the Mandarin, he's great. He's
Yeah.
hilarious. He's a
Yep.
great secondary character.
I
It
was gonna
was
say
like really
Ben
enjoyable
Kingsley
to
as the
watch.
Mandarin was horrible. Ben Kingsley as Trevor is amazing.
Yeah. If you, in retrospect, like if you go back and look at Trevor as, if you go back and look at Ben Kingsley as Trevor playing the Mandarin, you go, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually funny.
Like
Like
he
10
like
years later,
Yeah.
he's at, like, and
10
it
years
shows off
later, it's
that
actually amusing now, but
right.
back then it was like, age.
When it shows
Uh,
off that his character is actually a really good actor,
Yeah,
which
true.
is amazing because like in Shang-Chi, like they play him off like the guy's an idiot. Like there's a scene, one of my favorite scenes in it with Trevor. They're sitting in the car and he's talking about the time that he knew he wanted to become an actor. He's like, I was a little boy and I saw
Oh yeah.
Planet of the Apes in theaters, and I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, how did they get all those monkeys to do that? And she looks at me and says, Son, it's just acting. And he said, No, I knew at that moment I wanted to be an actor, and to this day it still wraps my head. I still can't wrap my head around it. All this time I thought those monkeys were riding horses, when in reality the monkeys were just acting like they were riding horses. And you see everybody else in the car just kind of like look at each other like, is this real life? Is this happening right now? Because his character thinks that those were actually monkeys in the original Planet of the Apes, acting like they were riding horses. He doesn't make the connection. Those are people in prosthetics, and I think that sums up his character. And that was honestly my favorite scene with him.
He's such an idiot, but yet he also is useful,
Yeah.
like like accidentally because he's an idiot, because he's
Yes.
also like basically insane, and he talks to like the weird other dimension creature,
The the the,
more,
the pig
more
chicken, I think they called it.
yeah.
yes. Who is voiced by D. Bradley Baker, one of the more famous voice actors out there, who generally does a lot of like weird character
That is
voices,
amazing.
things like that. I believe he does all the clones in the Clone Wars. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Clone Wars cartoon. D. Bradley Baker voices the clones.
Yeah.
So
He is a
yeah,
phenomenal voice actor. Like that
yeah,
amuses me that he is Morris.
yeah. And let's not, as we're still talking about casting, let's not forget this one particular character that is in it, but not really like showcased that much. Abomination,
Yes.
played
Yes.
by Tim Roth, who played Abomination in the pre-MCU
But
Hulk movie.
sometimes canon when it's convenient.
Yes.
Right. It's like that weird odd the black sheep of the MCU. Like
Yeah.
it kind of technically is a part of the
Right.
because I mean
It
only thing
happened, but they
I've seen-
never really address it. I think past like Iron Man 1 or maybe one or two other times, except for
right.
when Thunderbolt comes back. But
Yeah, the only thing that's come of it that's mattered is Ross. And so getting Tim Roth Abomination with a slight redesign because they added in his like fin ears.
well,
Um,
they made him look more comics accurate.
right.
Well, and
So
they
like that's
explained
cool.
there's an interview I saw where they explained that is the same Abomination from the Incredible Hulk film. And then people are like, well, but he looks so different. How do you explain that? And they said, oh, well, he wasn't done mutating yet. Oh, okay. I'll buy it.
Nice for
We
me.
get comics accurate Abomination. I'll buy it.
It's a cop out, but it still works. But the point being is that we now introduce Abomination into the MCU
Yep.
as Tim Roth, a character that previously played him,
Yep.
and sets him up as a character that's been in the MCU.
Yep.
Like he exists in this universe and has existed in this universe for a while. I mean, Wong, again, famously, the character knows him, has conversations with
Well,
him.
and like
And
you kind of get the feeling that those two have known each other for at least a little while because they have a fairly one-sided but a bit of camaraderie. It seems like
Yeah,
almost.
kind of like partnership almost in a way.
Yeah. Which I would love to see the backstory on that.
I think there's a theory, and maybe you and I discussed this as well, that Wong was there during the blip, and now that the Sorcerer Supreme wasn't there, he had to find some way of getting money, so he cage fought.
I mean,
He,
I could see Wong doing that actually.
he was cage fighting for money, and that's how he got introduced to Blonsky, or Abomination.
Yep.
So, again, he's in the movie 10 minutes most.
Probably not even that.
Not even that, but it's still a very important addition to the movie
Right.
for
Yes.
the connective tissue and eventual expansion of the MCU.
Right, because for example, Tim Roth has already been it's already been announced that he is going to reprise Abomination in She-Hulk,
Yes.
which just the other day on Disney Plus Day they finally showed the first teaser footage of She-Hulk.
Yep.
So yeah, this movie already pre-set up that connection to for a later series.
And the other thing that we can't, we can't overlook as well is because we have Abomination, we have the upcoming Spider-Man movie, which is going to feature characters like Doc Ock and Green Goblin, and then again, spoiler type thing for Venom. Venom is now canonically, um, very briefly, but canonically part of the MCU.
Yep.
So and we also have, again, Thunderbolt Ross. So we have all of the pieces in place to potentially do a Thunderbolts movie.
Which I would be all for.
Right.
Yes, no, absolutely.
I've heard a lot of people say that Captain Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Zemo being around, and since he is the leader of the original incarnation of the Thunderbolts, they could include him. And then you could get Abomination to be a part of that team.
Yep.
Which would be cool and a little bit different. And I mean, and I liked also that one person I saw online said that the name maybe comes from Thunderbolt Ross is the one who starts the group, and they just name it after his nickname.
Right.
So they the Thunderbolts. So that would be cool. So yeah, there's a lot of it's not. I wouldn't say, because at the beginning you guys mentioned how this movie works as a standalone movie. Like you don't really need that much MCU info to enjoy this as a movie because it's fairly hidden, and that's nice. But the things that they do have are nice connective tissues. Like they're almost like deep cuts, but they're nice connective tissues for the further MCU.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So, we've obviously spent a lot of time talking about just like the core elements behind the movie, the casting and the acting of the movie. And then, we spent a little bit of time here and there talking about the story of the movie. And I don't know that there's a lot that we really need to say about the story in and of itself. It works.
Yeah.
It very much works. Obviously, Wenwu being the antagonist, the Mandarin, and the Ten Rings, they delve into his backstory, how he found the rings. He was a warlord. They grant him essentially immortality. They don't really go into the history of the rings that much, other than they were just something he found.
Right.
And in fact, they actually, and initially I thought I would be disappointed by this, but I actually didn't care that much when they introduced, the Guardian Dragon. I was hoping it was going to be like a Mocklin, but it's not. It's just a dragon.
It's just actually a dragon.
No, it could be still a Mocklin, but they didn't go into Fing Fang Foom or anything.
Right. They did. They had every opportunity to bring in Fing Fang Foom, but they didn't.
Yeah.
But I don't think that hurt anything. I think
No.
it actually worked well because I think everyone was expecting Fing Fang Foom, considering we're talking about the original, the actual Ten Rings and the Mocluin technology. And I believe if I remember correctly, we do see that the rings change size. Like they have the ability to shrink and grow, kind of like Frodo's One Ring,
Right.
except he's got 10. So
Got that bling,
uh,
yo.
The rings are like bracelets, but I guess they would be rings if you're a space dragon.
Right. Well, I mean, there's still rings.
Yeah,
yeah,
Well,
I
I mean,
mean,
I guess you could think of a ring as like a finger thing.
right.
yeah,
Well, like for me, I like the fact that they updated the 10 rings because I mean, originally in the comics they were 10 finger rings, and each one had like a different
Power.
power, and like they were at one point they were second in power only to the Infinity Gems, which I mean put them pretty high up on the power list. But they were all like weird powers. Like one of them just allow you to fly. One would make you invisible if you wanted to. One could shoot fireballs. I mean, like you list some of those and you're like, that's what's second to the
oh,
Infinity Stones.
oh,
But I
oh,
Other
mean,
kind
oh,
yeah.
right? But I mean, like they all had weird powers. But so I like the fact that they updated it to be more of a I don't even know how you describe it. More of a
Energy, like force
energy manipulators. Which I mean, I think worked because like had they gone with the original style of the 10 rings and had to explain each one, I feel like
yeah.
that would have been a deterrent to the film. So I do like the more streamlined rendition of them.
They also use them as a weapon. Honestly, kind of reminds me of more like exotic, like Eastern martial art type weapons, like some kind of like extended tonfa kind of
Right.
thing, or like some kind of like nunchuck thing.
it actually
Or some like
reminds me of
weird
like
ring weapons. So
they actually again because they're like that connective force tissue like energy binding thing, and the way they use them reminds me a little bit of like the comma with the chains and the balls on the
oh
Yeah.
they're almost like a whip type weapon or a
Right.
chain or something like that that has
Well, I mean,
the ability to be used as
So it felt more East Asian in the way the
yeah,
fighting style of it, and it gave it a more, I don't know, it was more interesting
it
than just like
fit.
pointing fingers or whatever. Like it made them
Right.
more fluid, dynamic,
Yep.
and have them more interesting as far as like a fight choreography
Oh
thing
yeah.
goes. So I think that was a good choice to update them and change them that way as well.
Right. Well, I
And
mean,
plus, it's something very powerful based on how like Captain Marvel and Bruce Banner couldn't figure. Oh, spoilers, by the
yeah.
way, they cameo in a end credit scene. How they're like, I don't know what it is, what the origin of it
Yeah.
is, and they might get into like them being Makulin rings or something, and they
Well,
might
they.
get into that backstory later, but they obviously are saving that for a later movie.
Yep.
And yet again, it didn't bother me because that's like background info that just would have kind of like that exposition would have dragged the movie down a bit. And
Yeah.
so just like ignoring it for, another Marvel movie to explore later or a Shang-Chi sequel, which they're probably going to do.
Oh yeah.
Um, I think it's totally fine. Like this movie's story was a good, pretty streamlined movie that kind of like kept things going and gave you just enough to like be interested in what the main story was happening at that
Oh,
moment.
absolutely. Yeah.
The other crowning achievement I think to this is that most of the MCU has been a build up type thing. It is playing the long game.
Yep.
It is like you have to get all of the pieces create a whole. Um, and which is kind of a bit of a deterrent to people trying to get into, newcomers trying to get into the MCU because it's like, oh, I have to go watch movies that came out in like 2008 up until now. I
Right.
have to watch 13 years worth of movies in order to like catch up to it. Shang-Chi's not that way.
Oh no, not at
Like
all.
you can jump into it and connect some of the dots, and they give you a little bit of explanation of some of the things that happened. Again, the blip and Wong and Abomination, like they kind of touch on some of those things, but it's not a central component. So Shang-Chi is to me a great way for people to kind of get into the MCU without
Yes.
having to spend a lot of time getting into the MCU. It's a good way it's a good way to hook them. You hook them, you pull them in, and then once they're like, "Oh man, this is really cool. Like, I kind of want to find out about this old stuff." Well, better get a Disney Plus subscription and
Yeah.
go watch 13 years worth of
Yep.
movies.
Be a lot cheaper than buying them all individually.
Also, I mean, I guess it's technically a superhero origin movie, but it didn't feel overly. It didn't fall into like a
Yeah.
lot of like cliches or trappings of us. And I mean, I guess it helps partially that he's not like Batman or Superman, where everybody knows that origin story, and it's been like redone so many times that like every human being on Earth knows it now.
Right.
Spider Man. So
Man.
so
How
I
many
guess
Uncle
that
Bens are
helped.
we gonna lose?
Yeah, right. So, but even regardless of the fact that most people aren't familiar with his origins, I feel like it was done well enough, and that he was a pretty well-formed person and character for the most part. It's not, you didn't have to, like, I mean, it did show some of his training as a kid, but like
Yeah.
as an adult person, he didn't really need any more like training to be a hero. He
Yeah.
he needed to like kind of introduced to the world, and I guess he had like a little bit of training to like learn about like his mother's side, like their kind of martial arts or
Yeah.
whatever. But he was like fairly well formed. He just needed like he needed personality changes.
Yeah.
He needed character changes versus like physical training or power training, which I
Right.
feel like a lot of origin movies do. And I think that helped it a lot in that the character changes are much more interesting as an audience to me to see
Oh
than
yeah.
him like having to figure out his powers and crap like that. Like
Right.
that gets it's kind of amusing, but it gets old. So I think that helps this movie as well in that even though it's an origin movie, it does it in a better, more interesting way.
Yeah.
It's not a tiring kind of rehash sort of origin story.
Yeah. I definitely agree with.
I think that's kind of where, if we jump back to the MCU, that's where um, the first Captain America movie, Captain America: The First Avenger movie, excels. Is he doesn't really have to spend a whole lot of time figuring out his powers. Like, he's born in wartime
Yep.
and just jumps right into it. Like, so they don't spend a lot of time explaining what he can do and what he is. I mean, it's a very simple explanation. He's a super soldier.
Yeah. He's just
And
really, really good.
yeah,
I,
he's really good at
I'll say
everything.
physically and personality wise, he's just really, really good.
Almost like raise it in a way. Like he's just like really good at fighting all of a sudden just because he's like strong now or whatever.
Yeah.
But you kind of don't care because it's more about him coming into being the person that like personality wise he always was. It's like he always was a strong protector, kind of good
Oh yeah.
person.
Yep.
Now he just has like the strength and the ability to enact that.
Yep. Absolutely. And Shang-Chi felt very similar. He didn't, like you said, he didn't need to go through a lot of changes. He was already, a trained to be a world class, assassin. So I mean, he knows how to fight. He knows how to defend himself. He knows how to go on the offensive as well as the defensive. He knows various, how to handle various weapons. He's super skilled. So they didn't need to show like a training montage, and like that worked for this film. He was a guy who was already good at that. He just needed the motivation to use those skills.
Yep.
Yeah, he needed to learn to accept himself and like his place.
Yep, absolutely.
In the circle of life.
Right.
Um, and of course, again, we talk about Trevor Slattery as one of the standout characters of the movie. Um, I I feel like even I don't remember his name. Blade Fist, the
Razor Fist.
Russian,
Razor Fist.
yeah,
Yep.
Razor Fist.
Not Taserface.
Not
Yeah,
Taserface,
not
Razor
Taser
Fist.
Face. Different character.
Um, yeah, Razor Fist was another one of those just like kind of out there but entertaining,
Yep.
cheeky, kind of fun characters. You're like,
Yeah.
you originally see him, you're like, oh man, they're gonna kill him off. Oh,
Right.
he lived.
Well, like
Oh, he
I've
continues to
noticed,
live.
like when I watch this movie, and and I think back to Batroc the Leaper, it seems like whenever Marvel puts a random B string or C string character in their movies, fans always go, "I like that guy." They liked Batroc. They liked Crossbones. They like Razor Fist. It's the entire cast of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
But like Marvel, like sometimes those characters, like Crossbones, are underutilized. But what they do use them for is always enjoyable. It seems like. I mean, so Marvel does a really good job of not just wasting those characters.
I feel like maybe DC could learn a thing or two here. Like,
DC needs to learn how to handle their mainstream characters, but
yeah,
I'll be
I don't know.
honest.
Maybe the next Batman movie would benefit from having Kite Man in it.
Everything would benefit from having Kite Man in it.
I mean,
Hell
especially
yeah.
if Harley Quinn kind of incarnation of Kite.
Right? If they make that Kite Man into a live action, I will be so happy.
Yeah.
So
Which,
happy.
speaking of, did you gentlemen see the trailer for the new Batman movie?
Yes.
Yeah, Robert Pattinson one.
Yes, the Robert Pattinson one.
I was skeptical because I'm not like a huge fan of him for
Yeah.
anything. I mean, I don't hold like Twilight against him, so I'm not basing it off of that. It's just like I've seen some movies where I'm like, yeah, he was all right, and then some where I'm like, meh. But and I was kind of meh thinking about him being Batman, but the trailer I thought looked
Looks
pretty good.
pretty solid. Yeah.
I'll definitely go watch it.
Yeah, I'm at this point I'm still more interested in Andy Serkis as Alfred than I am of Batman because
Right.
I think Batman, not to segue too much, suffers from um, too many goddamn explosions
Yeah.
in his movies.
Yeah.
Like especially after The Dark Knight, like it's like Michael Bay explosions
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And it's also like, how many people can Batman inadvertently kill?
Right.
Come on, guys. Like,
We've
can
seen
we
it
add a
done. Try
little
something new.
like can we add a little bit more depth to this character than just angry orphan?
Yeah.
Like,
So
anyway,
yeah, I guess not wrap up, but I guess to go back to Shang-Chi, I will just say that I also thought that the kind of more fantastical elements that they brought in, because like the movie was pretty grounded for the most part, other
Yeah.
than obviously the alien rings. But then when they went into the other realm, and like you see like classical Chinese mythological creatures walking
Yeah.
around and stuff, and that I thought that might be weird, but somehow didn't phase me at all.
Yeah.
Like
It made sense.
I guess we were already kind of introduced to like aliens with Guardians of the Galaxy and kind of like multi-dimensional stuff.
Right.
So I guess it wasn't too weird, but I did think that that was like cool and handled pretty well, and I wasn't like overly uh taken out of my suspension of disbelief wasn't overly ruined by it, and like
Right.
the dragon was cool.
Oh
Even
yeah.
the weird demon thing that came out was like that. It was kind of classic, like third act, like lots of CGI or whatever,
Yep.
but it wasn't. I didn't feel as like crowded or overstuffed as like some third act CGI battles can be.
Yeah.
yeah, and props to Marvel for kind of picking something different as the villain, because I think when you and I were watching it, we were kind of whispering back and forth like, are they bringing in Atrocitus?
Yeah, we were like, or we were like, is a Nihilus coming in?
Yeah,
Like,
Annihilus. Yeah. Because Atrocitus is a Green Lantern villain.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, he doing an Nihilus? I mean, they were talking about, this extra dimensional, dark dimension creature,
Yeah.
negative zone creature, and we're like, are they bringing in?
and honestly, we were kind of stoked. We're like, oh my god, are they doing a Nihilus? And then like it wasn't, but it was still like cool or whatever. I'm like, that's
Right.
fine.
Yeah, it's
Oh yeah.
the soul eating space.
Squid thing.
I guess it's a dragon, kind
Yeah,
of.
space
Squid
dragon.
dragon bird man. And bear man.
Bird man. It's basically like
Get in here.
it was like a xenomorphed Western style dragon versus like Eastern style dragon, I guess.
Right. It was a Cthulhu dragon.
Yeah, spaghetti dragon.
Spaghetti dragon. That's it. It
It's
will forever be
cool.
known as Spaghetti Dragon now.
Yeah,
There's a luck dragon.
it's the nega luck dragon.
Oh god.
It's the evil luck dragon.
The bad luck dragon?
Yes.
Or just
Yeah.
just the bad dragon? Wait.
Wait.
Can't call it that one.
Um, so,
on.
so yeah, the fantastical elements I thought were handled well. And that I just feel like I guess there could have been a way that they could have made it like doofy or weird, but it wasn't. It didn't feel that way.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
like
I guess-
all the CG was done in a very thematically fitting way, so it didn't look like you could clearly look at the dragon horse thing and know that's not a real creature, but aesthetically it fit. It didn't look. I don't want to say out of place because it's a dragon horse, but it didn't not fit the movie.
I think the way they played it very smart in that they used Asian influences, mythos,
Yes,
things like
yes.
like the big like tiger things.
Yeah,
that are like always in front of like temples or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean those
familiar
as
enough things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they use a lot of Asian influences, so that you can see how the Asian culture, built around
This alternate dimension.
Yeah.
these influences, and it was kind of all intertwined. into this similar element. So thematically it fit,
Oh
and the
yeah.
designs fit, so that I think that's where our suspension of disbelief we didn't have to have that, because we're like, okay,
Right.
like I understand from world cultures and things like that why this big like lion dog thing is there.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yep. That makes yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
So
And it was a nice way to me to also include some like Asian culture elements. Like I kind of like it's a smallish kind of thing, but I sort of like that scene where Shang-Chi and Katie's character were like with I think her family, like they were like having breakfast or
yeah,
something, or
it's her,
lunch or
yeah,
breakfast or whatever.
yeah, it's
And
Katie's
kind of
family.
and they're like speaking Chinese and they kind of have some of those elements. Like they didn't do anything that to me felt like stereotypical or like kind of like pandering to like Asian culture, but they like did it in a way that felt real. That like, I mean, I can't say as not being an Asian American or whatever, but to me, it felt like that seemed relatively authentic without
Yeah.
like overly being like, "Ooh, look at us, we're Asian and we're
Eh,
paying homage to Asian culture," but like enough that it made sense. It felt
right.
like a good amount.
It felt natural.
Yeah.
Yeah. It did. Yeah. It
Yeah.
wasn't forced.
Yeah, it wasn't like we got to be ethnically diverse because this is an Asian movie or whatever. It was just like it fit within the
Right.
context of the movie.
Well, I mean, Disney's been kind of slammed before for quote unquote whitewashing and things like that in some of their content. So the fact that they were able to, and again, this goes back to smart, intelligent writing, intelligent casting, and everything else like that. Like they didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel like they purposely tried not to do it. It thematically fit every element of this movie to have the people playing who they were.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even if you look at the Mandarin's, Assassins Guild or whatever it is, um, he has multinational people. I mean,
Yeah.
Razor Fist is, I think he's technically Russian, I
Well, yeah,
think, or
I
so, or
was
Eastern European.
Eastern European. He wasn't Russian.
Definitely a European
Yeah.
type dude, Caucasian type dude.
Yeah.
Right.
But, they have, all these multinational people in this organization because it makes sense
Yeah.
thematically.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, and I'm not going to say props to Disney for, not whitewashing this. I'm going to say props to Marvel and by extension, I guess Disney, for just intelligent writing and cinematic direction.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Don't ignore the cultural influences of whatever movie you're basing it in, but also don't try to like overly shove it in her face just so you can like pat yourself in the back for being like diverse or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
you want some kind of balance in that, and I felt like Shang-Chi did is good as a blockbuster type movie could probably do in
Right.
that essence.
I agree. I agree.
Yep.
So I was gonna say. So if you guys had to pick one scene that was like your highlight, what would it be?
So, mind you, folks, we saw the movie a few months ago when it first came
Yeah.
out.
Right. I
So
saw it
I'm,
yesterday.
right. I'm kind of dredging up memories.
I still have an answer. I think it probably it's like a tie between I really liked when Wenwu goes to like try and find the portal and he meets the person who would end up being his wife. Like their first interaction in that like fight dance scene,
Right.
I thought I really liked that hidden tiger, crouching dragon type,
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
crouching tiger, hidden
I
dragon.
mean, either way, really, we don't know what these
Either way,
tigers are doing anymore.
I like that type of choreography, and I liked them starting as like fighting each other to the death, but then it turning into almost like a romantic kind of thing. I thought that was done really cool, and to me, it's like when you really switch the vibe of being like, oh, like Wenwu slash Mandarin is not like really a bad dude. I mean, he
Right.
is, but like there's a lot more complexity to him than you would think. And I was like, that's really cool. Or conversely, I did also just really um like when Wenwu and Shang-Chi fought at the very end. Because
Yeah.
I mean it looked cool and whatever, but I also liked I don't know the emotionality of how like they're really complicated, fraught relationship.
Oh yeah.
How that really came to a close, and how it then ended with, like Wenwu, ultimately sacrificing himself to help his son, and that's really all that he cared about, was like trying to keep his family together. So I felt like it was good for both Shang-Chi to grow as a character, and also like really hitting home how Wenwu is just a very intelligently, coolly written character, and it's probably like my favorite character in that whole movie, and one of my favorite MCU characters in general, just because of how well Wenwu was portrayed in the movie.
All right.
I would. I was actually, before he said it, I was thinking of the final fight between Shang-Chi and Wenwu
Yeah.
as probably one of the defining scenes. Probably otherwise, um, more lighthearted scenes would probably be, most of the early interactions with Katie and Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were just generally funny, lighthearted, enjoyable scenes.
Right on. Right on.
How about you?
I'll say for me, I mean, we're going 3 for 3 here, and if those of you watching the video can tell what scene was my favorite, the fight scene at the end, I thought just everything about that was very incredibly well done. Apart from that, I think I mentioned it earlier, the scene with Trevor in the in Razor Fist's car explaining why he became an actor, like that.
Yeah.
I had to actually, like, luckily I watched it on Disney Plus. I paused it because I was laughing so hard at just how dumb that whole scene was, but in dumb in a enjoyable way.
Also, all the fight scenes we talked about, great. Like the
Oh
bus
yes,
fights,
yes,
really cool. Side of the building fight, really cool. Even seeing the brief Abomination
yeah,
and Wong fight scene is cool. The like various things that they did at the end, the big battle scene, even with like the other minor characters, like all the fight choreography. Just to repeat on that, I thought it was just really well done. It's just so refreshing to not see so many fast cuts and edits in a fight
yes,
scene. Actually
yes,
be able to like visually comprehend a fight
yeah,
was just so nice and refreshing.
Yep.
absolutely. I mean, so
Yep.
I mean, all in all, if you guys can't tell from listening to us, we all three really enjoyed this film.
Yeah.
Like it was said at
I,
the top of the show, it's kind of a surprise hit, but one that I'm glad was a hit.
yeah, I would say uh, definitely within my top five
Yeah.
Marvel.
Yep.
Um, and we're coming up on our time here, folks. So we're kind of wrapping things up. I don't want to underpin the other actors' contributions to this movie. Sean's sister, Ji Ling, uh, fantastic character, very
Yes.
funny, very interesting character, very interestingly motivated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Played it very well. Sean's mother was a fantastic character as well. Same thing with his aunt, played by the famous Michelle Yeoh.
Yep.
Um, so there are all these other characters and elements that were really fantastic. We're just kind of running out of time to be able to talk about all of them. And again, we didn't even really talk about we didn't go through like the main, all the main, the whole story, kind of like what our typical reviews are. So that just goes to show you how awesome some of the other the other elements of this are
Yeah.
in more than just its writing. It is the sum of its parts. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so yeah, Shang-Chi, a fantastic movie. Highly recommend it.
Yes.
Um, if this movie is any indication of phase 4 of the MCU, then I'm very eagerly looking forward to what else they have coming.
Oh yeah.
Let's all admit it, folks. They have a lot of stuff coming.
Yeah. They just announced like 20 new shows on Disney
Yeah.
Plus that are just Marvel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, of course, obviously, coming soon, we have the Book of Boba Fett, which I think all three of us are very much looking forward to.
Yep.
Boba Fett gets his due.
Yes.
Uh,
Finally.
right. Tamura Morrison gets his due.
Yeah.
As
I was just happy for Timur. It must be great to be, he's probably what, like in his 50s, maybe even almost 60. And it's just cool, good for him for finally getting like a leading role in a huge major production of something.
Yep.
And also cool for anybody that's, like Miori or, Kiwi background. Like that's pretty cool too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I mean, him and Jason Momoa and Taika Waititi, they've all done very well in being able to kind of promote that culture
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, it kind of ties again back into our conversation about Shang-Chi, that culture aspect of things. Disney's really kind of showcasing a lot of different cultures lately.
Yep.
If you look at Moana, Raya and the Last Dragon, Luca, and their Coco,
Yep.
and the new movie that they have coming out, Encanto,
Yep.
Encanto, which I admittedly don't know a whole lot about, but
Yeah.
it seems to focus on a lot of Hispanic, Latin American, or what's the term, Latinx, I guess maybe
Yeah,
is the
Latinx. Yeah.
Latinx is
Is it
the
Latinx
new.
or Latinx?
I think it is. When I was in college, somebody said it, and they said I always thought it would be Latinx, but they actually said Latinx, and I
Oh,
was like,
okay.
"Oh, okay, is that how you say it?" All right.
That's that whole thing of I don't know how to say that word because I've only read it.
Right.
That was it for me. I've never heard that word spoken out loud.
Yeah, same here. Anyway, so there's a lot of diversity and inclusion these days, and it's being done intelligently
Yes.
Yeah.
rather than just, as we said, doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Shang-Chi, in a lot of ways, actually, to me, is kind of like the East Asian Marvel movie that for like how Black Panther kind of was for Africans and African Americans or whatever for the MCU. Like it was like a good way of like kind of showcasing like a particular region's culture in a way that wasn't pandering and wasn't also like neglectful
Right.
and and was like a huge big hit for them too. And
Right.
I'm really excited to see how I mean, obviously, the end credit scenes kind of imply that Shang-Chi is going to have a bigger role in the MCU, maybe
Right.
even be like kind of a leading figure in whatever like a new Avengers would be. And I'm really excited. And since I like his character so much, I would be really happy to see, him be like almost like I don't know, maybe a Captain America or like some like bigger figure within
Right.
whatever this show is going to be.
I'd be all right with that.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, with that, I think we're at time, I would say. So we will go ahead and wrap up for today. Thank you to Tim for finally watching the damn movie so that we could have this episode. And thank you for Disney Plus for putting it on their platform so that Tim could finally watch it so we could have this damn episode.
Yep.
And thank you to all of you, our listeners. And we thank you to our sponsors. And by sponsors, I mean the platforms and people that we work with on this. So we are hosted obviously on Anchor.fm, who also feeds out to several other podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and several different others. You can listen to us on any of those platforms, including Anchor.fm. You can find the video recordings on YouTube. You can also find us occasionally live streaming on twitch.tv/nonsequiturnerd, Twitter at nonsequiturnerd, and facebook.com/nonsequiturnerds. With that, then we will give a final shout out to, I believe, the count is up to 48. So
47. Or
47,
47.
47. So we'll give a shout out to Uable for just
48.
being a terrible individual. And we have some plans in the future for Tim and I to get together.
Yep.
So maybe we actually will record that review episode.
Maybe somebody else has already been planning it. Spoilers.
Teaser. And actually, we may have a few review episodes coming up in the near future because,
Maybe.
as you have figured out from this podcast, very in the near future, we will have one of the biggest movies of the century, in Tim's mind anyway,
Yes.
of Ghostbusters Afterlife coming out very soon, which, as of this recording, Tim and I have plans to go see together.
Yeah.
So,
I'm excited.
yeah.
I'm excited.
So again, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you to our reoccurring guest here to my right, and we appreciate you and hope to catch you next time. All that mushy stuff. So for non sequitur nerds, I think we're going to sign off for the night. And I am Ian.
And I'm Tim. Catch y'all
And
later.
I'm
And he's Keenan. Did you guys know
Exit.
that? He exists. He's not a figment of
Wait,
our imagination.
here, maybe.
Ah, he doesn't exist. Good night, everybody.
Good night.